So when you're doing detailed drawings, and also particularly when you're doing etchings, you need to understand about hatchings and cross hatchings, mainly because when you can't colour, particularly on an etching, you can't colour an area where you want it to become dark. You actually need to use cross hatchings to produce an area that is more shaded. So when you're using thin pens such as these, like a 0.4 art line, like this one, or a permanent pen, these are really fine nib pens. So we don't want you colouring with these kinds of pens. So the idea with this is you're creating small lines. So we create them further apart first up, and then I'm going to get them closer together. So this is what we call a hatching. And you can see just as a visual that where their lines are further apart, it appears lighter, and when the lines become closer together, they become darker. And then when you want to go into a cross hatching, so if I just do the same with the same pen, this is the art line, the 0.4. And I'm just going to produce the lines going across. You can create a really dark area. You can see it's another tonal step down. So it's really when you're wanting to produce tone, when you can't use shading. And that's exactly what you have to use when you're doing etching, when you're using a needle to scratch into a surface when you, instead of doing any kind of shading with a pencil or pen. Same idea with this permanent pen. It's a little bit thicker. So you can see it looks darker here, getting lighter. I'll do a few cross hatchings down the bottom there. And then I'll just show you in pencil as well, because it definitely works in pencil. Nice sharp pencil for it, a nice 2B pencil. I definitely wouldn't be using a soft pencil. You can also do this on a round, just to show you. And so curving your hatchings already creates an illusion of a shadow down here. And then if I produce cross hatchings, keeping the curve of the line flowing with the circle, then I'm creating it darker as well. So it's just helping to create tone, but using line. So in the art room, we have lots of permanent art materials as opposed to water soluble. So I just want to show you that in terms of pens. So for example, when you pick up a pen, some of them will say permanent on them, and that is exactly that. So if we lay down those permanent lines, and this is another one here, for example, permanent. And then if we use a few non-permanent, so this one here, if it doesn't say it, then it's more than likely not permanent. The regular textures aren't permanent. I also have a range of oil pastels that are permanent versus water soluble as well. And then when you put water on over the top of a permanent, nothing happens. So that's why it's permanent. Whereas when we go over the top of a water soluble, all of your pen work is going to run. So that's why it's really important that if you're considering working with any kind of paint or wet media after you've done pen, it's really important you make the right choice with what kind of pen you're going to be using. So willow charcoal is would have to be the oldest drawing medium in the world, basically burnt wood. It's very fragile, delicate to use, this particular one. You can also get charcoal pencils where the charcoal has been put into a pencil barrel. The beauty of this one is that you can use the ends as fine lines, you can use the sides, fine sort of parts of the sides of it to smudge. You can use heavy pressure, light pressure. And you can also smudge. You can also use the smudge sticks as well. And you can still layer back in. And you can also do cross hatchings. So some really soft, subtle results with willow charcoal. So using colour pencil to do rendering, basically you're creating a shape. So if you drew it with a normal pencil first, start off with really heavy around the outside, really firm pressure. Oh, the pencil's just broken. This one. And then as we come into the middle of that shape, we're going to lighten the pressure that I'm using with my pencil. And you want to get a really gradual tonal lift. You don't want to get it jumping in layers. Really smooth, really light into the middle. And like I'm doing, you might have to turn your paper around to be able to access all of the shape really well and to get the blending and pressure. Okay, so it's rendering, so you get that dark to light. That can give you really good effect. So with colour pencils in blending, you can use primary colours. So I have a blue here. And I have a red. And we can layer colours together to create some really nice layering of colours. It can look really effective with yellows and blues together. And you start to create a bit of a purple look to it. Go back to your blue again. You can also do light colours, so if I, similar colours rather. So if I put some blue down and then go back in with my purple. And it just, instead of it being more of a flat colour, it creates more depth of colour. So just with some oil pastels, we can have a look at some light, and we can go into heavy pressure. We can also do some blending. So obviously if we're putting white with the black, it's creating a grey. We can do heavy blending, so we do fairly heavy pressure. And then really heavy, you can see it smudges really nicely. Whereas if you do the sort of lighter pressure, so if sort of light over this side and lighter over the top. I'll try that with a bit light blue just so you can see a bit better. You can still see that creates the texture of the paper. Whereas when you go the heavy pressure, it really blends it and creates more of a smoother texture. So if I add some blue on this side here, you'll see a bit more of a sort of blending. You can also use a cotton bud as well to blend further as well. For chalk pastel, obviously chalk is completely different to the oil. You need just a light touch. You don't need to have much pastel onto the page. You really don't need to be pressing very heavy. As you can see, you'll get a lot of chalk dust built up on the page. You can smudge it very easily. You can still layer, so just putting the white on there turns it into grey. You can use what's also really useful to know is that you can still draw with the end of the pastel, but you can also cover large areas with the side of your pastel too. You can layer. and then think about smudging as well. So, and you can also use the cotton buds as well. For smudging as well. So just a very different result, lots sort of smudgier and more pencil-like than the oil pastels as well. For stippling, it's basically creating lots of little tiny lines. So this is really good for creating texture, especially if you're doing something like animal fur. And really good if you're working with two tones. So lots of tiny little lines. And then scumbling is small movements, but this time in a circular motion. And again, you can go in with other colours. You can decide whether you want it to leave white in there or whether you want to really do more heavy blending. So scumbling. So for Sgraffito with oil pastel, first down you need to lay down lighter colour. You need to layer it down nice and thick and heavy. And it does need to be a lighter colour than the colour you're going to be putting on top. Let's put a bit of other colour in there. And then you're going to go over the top with a darker colour. So I'm just going to go over with some black. Now it doesn't have to be as high a contrast as this. It could be all blues, it could be all greens. Looks really cool if you're doing landscapes. And then using a, you can use the back end of a paintbrush. So the wrong end of a paintbrush to scratch in. You can also use a toothpick or a pencil. And you can even use your fingernails as well to drag lines through. But a toothpick, probably the best. Or the wrong end of the paintbrush, but probably a toothpick's best for that one.